Yamauchi steps down. Rare abandons GameCube. And the US Army wants you to play their game. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. Today we're going to be traveling back 20 years to August of 2002. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Wouter. Welcome back to the show, Wouter.
Thank you, and good morning.
Yes, it's another morning recording.
Yay.
Woo. Chance that we're not going to fall asleep. By at least 30%.
I just woke up, so I won't fall asleep. Hopefully our listeners won't fall asleep as well. Although I have to admit, sometimes I listen to podcasts to fall asleep. So and it probably happened on your podcast as well.
Not this one. Not this one. Not this one. Okay. So let's get the obligatory podcast banter out of the way. So, Wouter, what have you been up to lately?
I started making a Quake map again. So, there's a jam going on. So, and it takes like 2 weeks. And the theme of the mapping jam is brutalism. So, that's an...
brutalism?
Yeah. That's an architectural style.
Okay.
It's like a sort of really bare concrete Soviet style structures, and really big structures with really big building blocks. It's a really cool art style. Brutalism. You should look it up. And it's really
fit to it in the show notes.
It's really fitting for Quake, I think.
Definitely.
It's not being used a lot, but now we have, when this done, there's probably maybe 20 other mappers doing this, and then we have like 20 or more maps in that style, and everyone has their own interpretation on that style. So I'm really curious what that will look like. And I did the first part. I think I mapped for 4 hours on stream as well. And I think it's still on my Twitch. And you can see how a Quake map is being built. And I'm pretty terrible at it. Some people are really, really great in Quake mapping, but I'm also still learning. I think I made 4 or 5 maps now. And I'm getting the hang of it, but it's still not easy. There's such a lot of really small bits you can do in there, which I don't know what. And but it's super fun, but really time consuming. I hope I can finish it in these 2 weeks. Like I said, I mapped now for 4 or 5 hours on that map, and I have one room sort of done. So, and I want to make 5, I think. So, yeah.
But are you following all of John Romero's rules about how to develop a map?
Maybe you can invite him one day, and he can explain how to do that.
Well, he's working on a new FPS.
Yeah, I've seen that.
The ads are out there for hiring people and stuff.
Yeah,
so
a lot as well.
Who knows? We may get to see all of those rules implemented, and of course he'll probably be doing the interview circuit again. He's a guy I'm interested in talking to, but primarily for sort of the business and management side, which of course in his case there's the infamous Iron Storm debacle in the middle of all of it. So even though the successes are high, the stuff that I probably want to talk to him about the most is the stuff that I don't know how. I'm sure he's over it at this point, but it would be interesting to get some of those details. But
yeah, I don't know if he wants to talk about that part of his career, but he's a really he does a lot of interviews. I think you can probably find a lot of information about it already as well.
Oh yeah. Plus, there's that amazing book, Masters of Doom.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's really, if you never read that, you really should. It's
Yeah, no, I've read it. It's an excellent book, and already in my interview with American McGee, he talked about how pretty much anything you want to talk about with those early years of id software is dealt with in that book.
That was a really great interview. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was a fun one. All I have to say is the stuff that we talked about off recording was even better than the stuff.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
There was just a lot of stuff we talked about generally because we're both people expats. We both, have lived in countries other than our home country for many, many years. And we had such a good time just talking about the different experiences, being married to women who weren't from the countries we were from and stuff. Yeah, the stuff that's one of my best memories of doing this show was that part of that conversation, but it wasn't show relevant. We didn't record it, but we had a really, really good time with it. American McGee, fascinating guy, and yeah.
Romero also lives. He lives in Ireland now.
Yeah, he lives in Ireland now.
So he lives abroad now for him.
He is an expat, and that would also be an interesting conversation. I'd also like to know whether or not the move to Ireland was purely a tax issue, but that's because Ireland has no taxes on arts.
Yeah, that's true. I get paid from Google from Ireland.
Oh yeah, I almost took a job for Google in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
20 years ago. Yeah, that's I got stories about that interview. That was a fun one.
Maybe I can hook you up. I
don't want to move to Ireland.
No, I'm hooking you up with the interview with Romero probably.
No, dude, I got so many interviews. Oh my god, I am swamped with. I've got 5 finished interviews on my hard drive that haven't been edited. There's 4 interview episodes up on Patreon. Unintentional plug here, but I'll plug. We got to do it. If you join Patreon, you get early access to the interview episodes, and there's 4 of them up there. 3 related to Commodore, and also one about an early pioneer of online gaming. And I've got 4 more that are already recorded. I've got another big one. This is a story that really hasn't been told before. The 80-year-old who ran the project. We've been talking already 3 1-hour sessions done, at least 2, maybe 3 more to go. This is an amazing story. So that one's coming up. And I've got another one that's going to be a panel discussion I'm actually recording tonight. OpenGL Direct 3D, the debate from back then and how it shaped the way that video hardware works today and stuff. It fun stuff, all coming up, going to be on Patreon first. As soon as we're done with the catch-up-a-thon, I'm going to start putting those interview episodes back on the main feed. They will become part of the main feed. There will be no interview exclusives in that sense. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit before all of that stuff hits.
I'm looking forward for it. Especially the OpenGL versus Direct 3D discussion will be, for me, a fun and interesting one to listen to.
Oh, definitely. And the people that I have are true veterans of this who really know what they're talking about. So it's going to be good. But okay, let's get the banter done. People are here to learn about the history of gaming. So let's move on to the next obligatory segment, which is the plug. Remember, everybody, you can join us on Patreon and get those early access tidbits, but you'll also get the video versions of our next segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where the intrepid co-host must play one of the games that was reviewed in a publication dated August of 2002 that they've never played before for 7 minutes. And remember, we are always using the publication dates, so the cover dates. Obviously, all the news and everything happened at some point before that, so please don't send me any emails complaining that, oh, this actually happened before. We know it. We're using the cover dates. It's a way of organizing the show. So, Wouter, of all the amazing games that you could have chosen, there was Spider-Man and Barbarian and Britney's Dance Party and a plethora of bad Tony Hawk knockoffs like Aggressive Inline and Freak Style. You went with
ZooCube.
ZooCube. One of the, well, we're going to find out. So, are you ready for your 7 minutes in heaven?
I am.
Excellent. Then let's get to it. Welcome back, Wouter, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe ZooCube on the GameCube?
ZooCube is a puzzle game where you control a cube in the center of the screen, and you can turn the cube at 90-degree angles to change the sides. And, well, you have to catch all kind of animal bits and parts with your cube, and they land on one of the sides of your cube, depending how you aim it. And if there's two of the same animal parts stacked on top of each other, they will go away, and that's how you score points. And yeah, it's pretty hard to control because the cube is a sort of isometric view, and the animal parts only go from the top, from the left, or from the right, and it's really hard to aim that thing because it's isometric and you have just a regular D-pad. The analog stick didn't really work, so I had to use the D-pad, and when you use the D-pad, it's sort of hard to control. But yeah, you'll get the hang of it. Well, in that 7 minutes, I sort of got the hang of it. But yeah, it's colorful and it's really strange looking. Especially the tiger parts are a bit strange to look at.
They do sort of resemble a certain part of the anatomy of the tiger.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things we have to, I think we need a better description. So you have these weird geometric shapes that sort of have animal texturing or resemble animal body parts.
Yeah, for example, the cow parts are udders.
Yeah.
And the tiger parts are, I don't know what they are, but they are orange and have black stripes. And crocodile parts has teeth or something. So yeah, they are green with teeth, and it's a really hard to describe game.
Yeah, it's just so wrong on so many levels.
and it's really busy. The screen is so busy, and there's a lot of stuff happening on the screen which don't matter for the game, which doesn't help the game at all. Yeah, it's sometimes really hard to read what's happening on the screen. Well, normally when you play these kind of puzzle games, you want to get into a sort of zone or a sort of relaxing mode where you oversee everything. But it's really hard in this game to see what's happening all the time. And I think that will be really hard to get in that trance mode because of it.
Yeah, and this is one of the weird things because I've played a Game Boy Advance version of this game quite extensively. And there, number one, you don't have all this weird animal stuff going on. It's literally just different colored geometric shapes flying into the screen. I mean, they sort of resemble the shapes from the GameCube version, but without the animal theming. And there's also the backgrounds are just, very simple things like, a cloudscape or so, whereas the backgrounds here were just confusing as hell.
Yeah, they're just like in sort of nature scenes from different countries, but as viewed from above, also isometric. And there's a lot of animation as well in the background, which is really distracting.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to figure out what the hell was going on. Plus, it all had this sort of dark tone to it. I mean, it was like the programmer had discovered there's a thing called shaders and had to apply them to everything.
Yeah. There's not a lot of contrast. There's a lot of colors, but not a lot of contrast between the gameplay and the backgrounds.
Yeah, it really does feel like somebody had a decent idea, a decent design maybe, but there's just no rhyme or reason to how this was put together or why it was programmed and made to look this way.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because of it. I felt it was hard to get to used to everything, and also hard to get the hang of the game. Well, I think if it was a lot less distracting, then there's probably a pretty cool game in there. Because I like my puzzle games. That's why I chosen this game. I thought, oh, that's nice. Maybe I'll find a nice, relaxing new puzzle game again. But this version, the GameCube version, I also felt there was not a lot of depth in the game. So I thought it's just like, just stacking those animal parts and that's it. And it got a bit boring pretty soon. So I thought maybe, okay, if it's only this and you can do combos or stuff, then it's super boring. But you told me that there is in the GBA version, there is, you found out there is combos and that would make it a lot more interesting. And that makes me want to try it again and then just a GBA version.
Yeah, and this is where I'm very sad that the GameCube version didn't live up to it. But yeah, no, there's a whole timing system for how to basically swing this cube around so that these long chains of items that you've built up, you basically swing them in. If you get the timing just right, you can then build combos by matching stuff up that's in the middle with the stuff that's flying at you. You almost have to fall into a semi-zen state.
Yeah, like I thought, yeah.
To
the Tetris effect.
Yeah, exactly. Because, yeah, it just becomes absolutely crazy. And the other nice thing with the Game Boy Advance version is when you don't have a lot of things on there, it actually zooms in on the cube. And when you have a lot of things on there, it zooms out. Now, obviously, you're playing it on a Game Boy Advance screen. So it's really just one layer of zoom, if memory serves me right. But it's enough to sort of give you this better concentration on what's going on.
That's crazy that it isn't in the GameCube version. The GameCube version looks like a GBA game almost.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that fancy, or you don't feel that you're playing on the GameCube, and also. It's also strange that the analog stick isn't controlling well because it's a 3D object you control. I feel the analog stick would make sense here. Maybe you get easier hang off when you use the analog stick because you can use the diagonals and stuff. So, but
yeah.
Well, It's I think I wonder if they just first designed it for GBA and then made a console conversion, or the other way around.
Well, it looks like, just looking at the Moby Games credits, there's one person who is credited with the actual design of the game. And that is, and I'm going to kill the name here. The designer is Nalin Sharma.
Okay.
Is the designer. Now, and wait, now I'm looking up the Wikipedia page. So, hey, Nalin Sharma was the designer of the game and the CEO of a company called Puzzle Kings. And he came up with Zoo Cube around 1996. So he was, so it was an idea that was swarming around for a while. And so Nalin tried doing it in C++. He lacked sufficient knowledge on how to do it. And the whole thing then just gets picked up later on by others who do develop it into a bigger thing. Oh, here. No, Nalin submitted the game into a competition held by the magazine Edge and won, after which he partnered with Acclaim Entertainment to give his game a commercial release.
Huh. That's quite an interesting story, actually. Especially at that time.
Actually, this is cool.
Especially at that time. I think it didn't happen a lot at that time. Sort of indie game which got picked up and published.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And I'm seeing here... okay, so it's only after the game gets picked up that the name Zoo Cube was attached to it. So it's very possible that the whole idea of the animal parts and stuff is a late addition.
Yeah, maybe there is already older versions of this game without the publishing of Acclaim.
Yeah.
So that maybe it's called different. Is that? No. Well, we have to find out. Maybe the earlier versions are more fun.
Yeah.
Because I know there at that time when you picked up Tetris, for example, for GameCube, that's also a very not great version of Tetris, to say it politely.
Yeah.
So maybe at that time they had to figure out that puzzle games don't have to look fancy and just have to be about the puzzling.
And I think that that's one of the big problems, and this is also why the Game Boy Advance version, at least for me, worked so well, was that it's not cluttered. It's very straightforward. It feels very much like Tetris did, where it's, just keep going, it gets faster, there's more coming at you, and the pressure keeps mounting. Whereas the GameCube version doesn't even let you get there because you're so overwhelmed with all the graphical garbage that is completely pointless.
Yeah.
Like every time you made a match, you got to see some weird cartoon animal head pop up. What the frack is that about?
Yeah, it's too much. It's also the music wasn't well. Did you? Oh,
it's
yeah. It's not.
Let's call it what it is. It's
it's just there. It's not like really something you remember. So yeah, it's unfortunate. But if you say the GBA version is good, I can see there's a good game in here. So I'll try that one. And I saw it was really cheap to buy, so maybe I'll buy a copy. And
there you go.
Yeah, and do you know there's multiplayer as well? That would be
not
nice.
Not that I know of. I don't think
that's
so.
Unfortunate. I really love these games, multiplayer. My wife also loves puzzle games like these, so we actually hook up our Game Boys with the link cable and play a lot of puzzle games at night. So, for example, the last one we were really hooked on was Kirby Star Stacker on Game Boy.
Oh, that's a great one, yeah.
It's an amazing game, and I'm baffled that there's not a follow-up or a game like that later on. There is the Super Famicom version, but it's not a better version. The Game Boy version is still better. So it's weird that there's no modern incarnation of that game. So
that's a good question. I'd have to look and see what. I mean, those type of puzzle games have really been relegated to things like e-stores and handhelds and things like that. It would be interesting to see, but granted, if you try to play something like that on a phone, you run into the problem of the touchscreen controls become you lose the precision. I mean, my favorite game of that type is still Tetris Attacks on the Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah, that's also a great one.
Yeah. There is, I believe, a Game Boy version of it.
Yeah,
and it plays okay, but it doesn't have the same impact as the Super Nintendo version does.
But there's a lot of versions later on as well. I think there's one on the DS and GBA, and you have the Pokemon versions of that, the Pokemon Puzzle League on the Nintendo 64. So that got a lot of sequels. But the Kirby Star Stacker, unfortunately, not. So I would really love a modern version of that. It's really great. So,
okay.
Let's continue.
Would you recommend this?
Check it out on the Game Boy.
Well, you can't recommend that. You haven't played it yet. You may play it and tell me that I'm completely.
No, I think the gameplay in this game is good, but because of its. But it's really cluttered, and I think if you say the Game Boy version isn't, I would say if you want to try this game, check it out on the Game Boy Advance.
Cool. Okay, then let's move on to the last stop before we turn on the time machine, and that is to check in with our good friend Ethan to find out what I got wrong in our last jump in the Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, before we find out what I got wrong in July of 2002, we have
the voter comment.
Yeah, and this is a bad one. This is a bad one.
Oh, you think so? You really think so, Carl?
Yeah, and I noticed it in the edit already.
So when Carl was talking about Max Payne being purchased, the IP being purchased by Take-Two for $30-something million. $34 million. Wouter was trying to make a point that basically you should have, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you have kind of an uncertain prospect. I mean, you could have bought the studio probably for less than that, but they didn't buy Rebellion. They just bought the IP. Remedy. Yeah. I forget. They're all R words. But regardless, Wouter was making a very good point that basically no IP in video games has ever sold for that much before, and I don't think it was really worth it in the end. Instead, they could have just bought the company, and that would have worked out much better for them.
They probably could have, and yes, and I thought he was talking about, and we'll use it as a defense here, that it was very, very late at night, but I was thinking that he was talking about, the idea of buying IP as opposed to just buying the games, and I totally misunderstood. And as I was editing it, I'm like, oh no, what did I do there? Oh, that's so dumb. Because that was the whole point of the story, that it was a huge amount of money to pay for an IP, especially because at this point there's only one game.
Yeah, I don't even think they made $34 million off of the original Max Payne. So valuing it at that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think they were hoping maybe for more out of it. Also, Take-Two had just come out of some really, really bad financial situations. They suddenly had a bunch of extra money, and I think that with the success of GTA 3, they wanted to shore up their portfolio. And the last thing they wanted was Max Payne simply walking out the door and going to another publisher if Remedy still owned the rights.
Well, whoever the negotiator was at Remedy, they're a genius because they got way overvalued on that at that time. You know, you could argue whether or not it's worth that much now. Obviously, now Rockstar makes those games, or the one game.
No, there's only been only 2 sequels so far,
I know,
which is so bizarre because you could eat.
It was a flash in the pan, man. It didn't have that much lasting value. Anyways. Let's get on to the Department of Corrections for July of 2002. Firstly, we are in Resident Evil territory, for Resident Evil things are always happening, all the time, guiding the industry with the unseen hand. So you were questioning about the idea of survival horror. And, you know, we can do the debates on what counts as survival horror. But the term survival horror was a term invented by the people in North America to sell Resident Evil.
Ah, okay, perfect. Yeah, and I couldn't remember which game got that moniker first. But so the fact that it was created by a marketing team is somehow not surprising.
I mean, I think it's a pretty good definition considering.
Definitely.
A good genre idea. I'm very picky about genre things, but survival horror has held up pretty well. Anyways, another thing on Resident Evil, you were talking about the GameCube Color version, or the Game Boy Color version, and that did not actually get published at all. You're like, I think it only got limited published. Nope, it didn't. It wasn't published. It's just
I was referring to Resident Evil Gaiden.
That's just the Game Boy.
That's Game Boy Color.
I don't think that's Game Boy Color.
Yeah, that's Game Boy Color.
All right, time to live fact check.
Live fact check. Fact check.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
You know, because there's another one that I think is only on the Game Boy as well. Yeah. Well, I stopped knowing about this stuff a long time ago. Individual series are not my forte.
I hear you. Yeah, no, Gaiden was Game Boy Color, and of course there's the tech demo out there of what could have been a straight port of the original game to the Game Boy Color that was never released.
Yes. So I thought that other one was Game Boy, so whatever, it's fine.
Okay.
Next up, when you did your July 2002 jump, you ran the wrong Department of Corrections.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I did fix the file within a couple of hours, so if anybody did download the wrong one, I am very, very sorry. And just cutting and pasting and putting files together, and something went horribly wrong.
He needs to label his files better, I think, is the real lesson of this.
I just grabbed it out of the wrong folder. I was not doing it from inside Audacity. Instead, decided I was going to be quick and just pulled files over from Windows Explorer, and it ended up being the file from the wrong.
Production behind the scenes here tonight on the Department of Corrections.
Yes.
Then we have talking about the PS5 price hike, and actually this was a question recently posed to me on Reddit, and I gave the response that there's one instance that I am sure of that this is actually not entirely unprecedented. It's a unique situation, but there has been an official price hike for a console in the past. That console was the Fairchild Channel F.
Really? Was this during the high inflation time of the 70s, or was there some other reason for that?
It had nothing to do with the economic situation. What it had to do with was FCC regulations. Those good fun things, because when they originally made the Channel F, they did not account for what kind of shielding they would have to do. Then in the final stages of production, they had to add a big old shield inside of it. And they sold it for the first holiday season at their the price that they were going for, $150. And then in January of the next year, they raised it to $170.
Gotcha. Okay, so basically you got the introductory price the first year because they had already, set it up that way and they couldn't go back on it.
Yeah, it was a last-second decision thing, and they were not making the kind of money that they needed to in order to sustain the console. Of course, in those days, the idea of making your money purely on the software was not quite there yet, so they needed to get ahead of something like that.
Makes perfect sense.
Anybody who tells you that Atari was not making money on its console, that is completely untrue. And I'm sure it's the same for the Channel F, but we don't know specifics about that because all the people who are involved are vanished or dead. So,
That sucks. I mean, it's such an important piece of the puzzle, actually. But, yeah.
Well, we've done what we can. Next, speaking of EA and FIFA. So EA lost the license to FIFA. Now, FIFA is just kind of a club organization. So FIFA didn't actually hold any rights to the players or the teams or anything. It was a weird thing when they made the first FIFA game back in '95. Basically the marketers wanted to get a name behind it. They got the name for FIFA, and then they realized they didn't have any of the player and team names. But because that first game sold so well, they kept licensing the FIFA license.
Gotcha.
And this year, FIFA did not renew the FIFA license. I don't know the specifics behind this. I'm not going to try to understand it, but they can still go to the Players Association and have all the things that they need.
I wonder if they can still do the World Cup mode if they don't have FIFA.
I'm not sure that FIFA controls that.
FIFA controls the World Cup and the European Cup and stuff. That's that's what they make the money off of. So it would be interesting to see.
I don't know the specifics of this. Won't dive any further into it.
That's probably a good idea.
One thing we will dive further into, though, is you were searching desperately for the name of the thing where the 3D space and you shoot out a laser beam to understand the geometries of the 3D space. The word for that is ray tracing.
Yes. Can't believe I couldn't think of that off the top of my head in that moment.
Ray tracing means about a million different things, by the way. If you're like, no, that can't be ray tracing. Ray tracing is reflections and light and things. It's like, no, ray tracing from the dawn of 3D graphics has meant something entirely different, and then they rebranded ray tracing to mean something else.
Oh, really? So when we get all the new GPUs that have hardware ray tracing, it's not that version of ray tracing.
It in a sense it is, because all ray tracing is tracing a ray. It's a vector. It's like it's not complicated. Ray trace is not, but like all 3D relies on ray tracing. If it's a 3D object, it's ray traced. And so they just rebranded it to mean something even more advanced, but it's just the same thing.
Gotcha.
It's just more ray tracing with higher CPU usage.
I can dig higher CPUs. That's better.
I'm not saying that the ray tracing doesn't look good. I just think it should be called something else. But yeah. Anyways. Then finally, on the subject of video game addiction, I do have to step in here as to the point of video game addiction and whatnot. There's obviously people who've done studies on this and things, but it's not actually addiction. Addiction very specifically means I'm pretty sure that it has to rely on a physical context. When it's applied to video games, it is more categorically accurate to say compulsion, video game compulsion.
That is a very astute observation. I like that distinction.
And there are still things to be said about this, and it's not like you can entirely dismiss the criticism. And I think I've been I was victim to it for a number of years, especially playing World of Warcraft. But I am not that I necessarily regret myself spending time with that, but it is something worth discussing, but it is compulsion, not addiction.
Very cool. And duly noted.
That's the end of July 2002, and we will see you next time for August 1982. The Department of
Excellent.
Corrections.
Thank you, sir, for your participation, your contributions, and, as always, your service.
Sucking up isn't going to get you a better grade here.
I was trying to be nice. I appreciate the effort that you put into this.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Especially since I don't pay you.
Peace.
Bye.
Oh, that's interesting that Channel F had a price hike, but that's a long, long time ago. And nowadays, when the market is just more standardized, I think it isn't really common to make your prices higher on the console.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, it's one of those weird moments when an outside force, the FCC in the case of the Channel F, forced them to make a change to the way that they manufactured the device, which ultimately changed the cost structures. And Ethan made a good point. Back then, you made money off the hardware. The idea of making money off the software wasn't an issue yet. And that is the reason why they couldn't just say, well, we'll eat the loss and that's it, the way that Microsoft is doing in the jump we're about to go to, taking at least $150, maybe more loss on every Xbox sold.
Yeah, the market was way smaller at that point, and probably the software was cheaper as well.
Well, no, remember, they were using cartridges.
Yeah, so the manufacturing cost.
Unit of software was much, much higher.
Yeah.
And the games were being produced relatively quickly and cheaply. It's not like you've got massive, teams of artists and stuff. If you've ever played a Channel F game, that is as simplistic as it gets. But the idea here is simply you have to make money off the hardware. You can't afford to sell it at a loss. And so the original budgeted price had to go up.
Well, the PlayStation 5 has also an outside force.
Exactly.
With the chip shortages and inflation. So, they also have to bring the price up. But did they really have to? Because what you say, they will make money out of the software. So maybe they should inflate the software prices, which they're also doing, instead of making the price higher of the console. Although the Switch, or like Nintendo and Microsoft said, we're not going to do a price hike, but the Switch has a new model, the Switch OLED, which is like 30 or 40 euros more expensive than the original model, and that's now the standard model. So, and they never brought the price down of the original Switch. So, in one way, they
also did a price hike.
Yeah, but more disguised because they just threw in a better screen and a bit of different pieces of plastic on the back so it could stand better or something. So in a way, they also did the price hike, but they disguised it with an upgrade or something.
And this is the thing: the moment in time that we're living in right now in 2022, with this inflation, with, you could almost say, a worldwide depreciation of currency values. And with all of the pandemic-related supply chain problems, plus the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all of these elements combined are creating circumstances that in the history of the video game industry, which remember is only about 50 years old. We're celebrating 50 years of the Magnavox Odyssey in September. This is unprecedented. There have been times in the history of the world where you've had massive switches in the values of currencies. You've had problems with supply chains, blah, blah, blah. But we've lived in a relatively peaceful 50 years now.
Yeah.
And this is just for the first time in 50 years, we're dealing with actual normal economic and political structures. And everybody's freaking the frag out. So, yeah, it's just weird. But, okay, enough about this. The mistakes of the past are behind us. Let us go forward to the mistakes of the now. By turning on the time machine and heading back to August of 2002.
I think this guy's the winner. 2002. The demographics are
Welcome back to August of 2002. Wouter, what's our first story?
Xbox's lackluster sales hit suppliers.
We talked last month about the arbitration between Nvidia and Microsoft over Xbox-related chips. This month, Cirrus Logic, I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, a chip maker warned that they were not going to meet their revenue targets due to a lack of sales to Thomson Multimedia, the makers of the Xbox's DVD drive. This led to a drop in share price for several other Xbox part providers, including Nvidia, Flextronics, Intel, and Texas Instruments.
Well, this sounds painful.
Yeah, and it is sort of interesting to see these knock-on effects, and also the fact that we're not necessarily at the point where we're getting very specific numbers about, how many Xboxes are being sold or what the order rate is on Xboxes, how many orders are coming in from distributors, how many orders are coming in from the big retailers. Those numbers aren't coming out, but suddenly you get this little glimpse behind the curtain when one of these relatively small providers that is very dependent on these big contracts suddenly gets hit with, expectations are not what they were.
Yeah.
And so, this company that I had never heard of before, Cirrus Logic, is suddenly, the catalyst for everybody taking a quick hit to their stock price.
And what effect had this on the Xbox?
It doesn't have any direct effect on the Xbox, but it does have a effect on people's perception of the Xbox. Remember, part of the idea of buying a console is you're buying it not just because of the games that are there today, but you're buying it because you think, for the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever, I'm going to be able to play this, and there's going to be a lot of industry support. And if you are now a developer who has to make the decision, where am I going to stick my millions of dollars of development costs? And is it worth my while to set it up so that I can port this thing to the Xbox, or do I just write to the metal for the PlayStation 2? Those are big concerns. We've talked about that over the last couple months again and again in this time period with the middleware and all these different solutions that are coming out to help alleviate the very high cost of making games as well as porting games, because we're not like in the year 2022 where Xbox and PlayStation hardware is almost identical on a chip level.
Yep.
We're still talking about custom graphic chips in the PlayStation, custom chips in the Gamecube, off-the-shelf PC chips pretty much in the Xbox. But that doesn't help you if your main market is the PS2, and now you're like, okay, do we just make it for the PS2, or do we go and buy all these middleware products so we can also port to the Xbox? If the Xbox isn't a large enough market, then save the money, do a PS2 game, and call it a day.
Yeah, and there's another reason to not make a game for the Xbox in our next story.
Nice transition. You're getting good at this.
Xbox gets hacked.
An MIT PhD student, Andrew Huang, and I'm probably killing the name again, has foiled Xbox's security system by intercepting the system's secret boot block in the Nvidia chip, in theory making the running of non-licensed applications on the system possible.
So this is just a theory now.
Well, it's more than a theory. He's going to write this up, and it is going to become the foundation of a lot of the hacking on the Xbox. It's going to lead to Xbox Media Center and so on and so forth. And I also looked up Huang. He's actually still very active. He's been a consultant for a bunch of companies on security stuff, and he's also a big activist for the ability to go in and, use software and expand it and learn about it. And he even was, I believe, a named plaintiff in a lawsuit trying to get parts of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And I hope I'm getting the right law. I think it was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that essentially penalized people for trying to find security holes.
Yeah, that's not great.
No,
that should be that's always the discussion that is the hardware yours or is it the manufacturer's? And I always feel, I also have Apple devices, so I don't know what. Yeah, but I always feel it's better to have control of your stuff. But also that will mean the consumer most of the time has a less support, or it will so that's a problem. But so the Xbox get hacked. Yeah, that's not a great thing for Microsoft probably, and that's probably why they are going to make a second one.
Oh, you are on fire with the transitions today. Good one. Okay, keep going.
Xbox 2 to be ready by 2006.
Steve Ballmer was doing press in Japan when he let slip that Xbox 2 would be ready to launch by 2006. Microsoft immediately blamed the flub on a translation mistake.
And so what was the mistake?
Well, the mistake was that he was being Steve Ballmer, and he was famous for doing these kind of flubs. And the reality is obviously the Xbox 360 is going to be launched in 2005.
So earlier
than he said. Well, because the original Xbox doesn't really have the lifespan that they were thinking about, and they're not going to waste the momentum that they have by waiting too long because they're afraid of going up against the PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
And so they get to market first. They come out with a system that has a lot of the strengths of the original Xbox, standardized PC hardware, easy platform to develop for. But, when we get to that point, and we will cover that here on the show, the Xbox 360 has one huge advantage. They dropped the hard drive as a requirement.
The 360, it doesn't have an Intel chip, right? It does have that weird Mac PowerPC thing in there. Or
that's
was that
possible, but it doesn't matter by that point because it's all about the GPU. By 2005, it's not about the processor anymore. It's about the GPU.
Yeah.
And the fact that they released the Xbox 360 Arcade kind of solves that problem we just talked about with the hacking. So it gets a lot harder to hack a system that doesn't have the hard drive in it.
But you can buy the hard drive.
You can buy the version with a hard drive, and of course they're going to hack the 360, but it gives them also the advantage in price. So they're not going to take as big of a bleeding because they can offer the 360 Arcade at a very, very competitive price. And Sony is going to go all out and include a hard drive in PlayStation 3. And that's what's really going to hurt them in that generation, at least in North America and Europe. Obviously, in Japan, the 360 is still, the runner-up. But it is going to solidify Xbox as a contender on the market. But it is kind of funny that he lets this slip because, like we just said, it's about the future proofing.
Yeah,
and
it's not really. When you're a consumer of the Xbox, you bought just your brand spanking new Xbox, and there's already a new Xbox announced. You're not happy.
No. It's the Osborne effect right there. Okay.
Now let's continue with Nintendo news then.
Yes.
Nintendo shows off its big guns at E3.
After a lackluster year that saw few releases to appease the dyed-in-the-wool Nintendo fanboys, E3 became a showcase for Nintendo's biggest franchises: Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Zelda, Wind Waker, I can't remember.
Wind
Waker. A F-Zero all-made Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Zelda Wind Waker, and F-Zero all made appearances on the GameCube, with other stalwarts like Mario Party as well as GBA installments in most major franchises. Nintendo looks ready to take on Sony and Microsoft as long as it hasn't already ceded too much ground.
It's insane that with that lineup, the Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Zelda, the Wind Waker, and F-Zero, they didn't kill every competition, because I think those are probably the best games in that generation.
GTA 3, GTA Vice City.
Yeah.
All these games are going to come out against GTA 3 and GTA Vice City.
Yeah, and also, of course, the FIFAs and the Call of Duties and the stuff like that. And I always forget. I'm a gamer, but I'm always forget like the normal consumers buy other stuff than me. So that's
no. Okay. Let's not throw around the gamer tag, because that's bull crap. Okay, I'm a gamer too, dyed in the wool, if you so will, but never owned a Nintendo system. Never really cared about those games. I'm sorry, Mario, where's the story? No story, I don't care. Move on. If it's going to be an abstract concept, give me a puzzle game, give me Tetris. But if you're
every game is a puzzle game.
Every game is a puzzle game. No. Some games are simply reaction games, and a reaction is not a puzzle. Now, real-time puzzle games do exist, but okay, now we're getting off on a weird tangent. But what I'm saying is the problem here for GameCube is it comes out too late. It doesn't play DVDs, and it's not going to get any really good, mature games.
Other than Resident Evil.
It's getting Resident Evil, but it's getting Resident Evil at the same time that the PlayStation 2's got Fatal Frame and Silent Hill and so on and so forth. It's like it's getting those. Finally, Nintendo's getting those, but it's too little too late, especially when you know that the big Final Fantasies are coming, and they're coming to PlayStation.
That's also not a game I ever play, so...
Well, and neither did I.
So it's also a sort of taste thing, and
of course.
And probably the majority didn't have the Nintendo taste. I think
Well, see, in the States, Nintendo is still a massive powerhouse. Nintendo is... I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but I want to... probably the GameCube ends up at least... It probably beats out the Xbox in this generation.
Oh,
yeah. It's huge. But it's still just a small fraction of the PlayStation install base. Because the PlayStation 2 has all the big franchises, and at this same E3 we get, previews of things like Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper, and so on and so forth. And these games that are going to define the PlayStation 2, they have that edge. They have that edgier feel and look that basically also gave Sonic the Hedgehog a leg up over Mario in the 16-bit era.
Yeah, I also never understood that. So Yeah.
It's a question of which age you're at the time that you're playing the game.
Well, I was already 20 years old, I think, when I played Zelda: The Wind Waker. So, well, but yeah, maybe I'm just not afraid to embody the child in me.
Oh, please. There's nothing more childish than playing GTA 3 because it's purely like an 8-year-old's power fantasy, okay?
That's true.
It gave you the thrill of being, the kid who snuck out of their room and is watching the dirty movie that their parents are watching from the shadows, at night or something like that. These are childish pursuits, no matter how you cut it. It's just, is it a childish pursuit that's going to appeal to the teenage crowd? And that's kind of where Nintendo is going to falter a bit here, even though their game design has been polished to a T. But yeah,
but maybe the outside picture. If you don't play, I heard somebody say they never played Zelda, and then they suddenly and they bought Zelda, and they thought, well, just to because everybody said it's good, but that guy thought, well, what is this shitty game? It looks horrible. It sounds horrible. But
now, which Zelda are you talking about?
I think it was Ocarina of Time. So that guy thought, what is this stupid game about elves? And it's certainly not my taste. But when he bought it, because everybody said he must buy it, and he played it, and he was directly hooked. So maybe it isn't that appealing if you never played a Zelda game when there's a new Zelda game out.
Well, of course not. I mean, the Zelda games have their built-in fan audience and the people who've been playing them all these years. It's just like the new Monkey Island game that's coming out. If you don't have positive memories of it and you're just looking at these still shots of, clicking on stuff and dialogue happening, you're like, what is the appeal of this?
Yeah, that's true.
It's the same exact thing. I mean, some games obviously are more dramatic in their imagery and so forth, and can do a better job of just selling themselves off of a couple of video clips. But a lot of games play on nostalgia, on this idea of revisiting something that you hold dear. And that's a lot of the appeal of the Nintendo properties.
Yeah, look at Mario. He's like, when you watch his character, he's not appealing at all.
Well, it's also the fact, and this is one of the key things in the Nintendo franchises, there is virtually no story continuity.
Yeah, they're only made up later on. Yeah, that's true.
Every new generation of players can come to the game mechanic and experience it for the first time without a backlog of knowledge being necessary.
Mm-hmm. But that would be a good thing for Nintendo.
Well, and that's their secret. And the same thing with the GTA series. If you had to have played GTA 3 to understand GTA 4, you would have lost a ton of people on the way.
Yeah, but they still call it GTA 5 or GTA 4.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter when you jump into the game.
No, it doesn't matter. But when I see that, like, GTA 5, should I play GTA 4 first or else? It's confusing. Well, for example, the Zelda series always has just Zelda, the Wind Waker, Zelda, the Minish Cap, stuff like that. So
this is why we're going to get GTA Vice City, GTA Liberty City Stories, GTA Chinatown Wars, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but still the last game is GTA 5, I think. So
well, GTA 5 and then GTA Online, which is really just part of GTA 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, they stopped doing the whole add-on thing. But even GTA 4 had, the Ballad of Gay Tony and stuff like that added to it, and that were also sold as standalones. So it's just a weird way of doing it. But I mean, Super Mario Brothers 3 didn't sell worse because it had a 3 in the title.
That's true, but after that they stopped numbering
They stopped
it.
doing. Well, no, in Japan, Super Mario World was released as Super Mario Brothers 4.
Yeah, as a sort of subtitle, I think.
Yeah. And if you look at the Super Mario Land games, they also got subtitled numbers on the Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance.
Yeah,
So Mario Land,
that's
Super Mario
super
Land
confusing.
2.
The Game Boy Advance numbering. That's
Or suddenly the NES Super Mario Brothers 2 from North America with
Super
the Super
Mario
NES
Advance
graphics
1.
gets
Yeah.
released on the Game Boy Advance as Super Mario Land.
Super Mario
4,
Advance 1.
I think.
The first is Super Mario Bros. 2, I think. So Super Mario Advance 1 is Super Mario Bros. 2. Well, it's really confusing.
Yeah,
but
we don't need to go into it. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Other Nintendo news. Yamauchi steps down Yamauchi steps down.
Yamauchi.
Is it Yamauchi or Yamauchi?
I think it's Yamauchi.
I feel it's Yamauchi.
Okay, we'll say both and let's go for it.
Okay. Yamauchi or Yamauchi steps down amidst record profits.
Okay, and I'm Googling right now how to pronounce this guy's name. And of course, the Wikipedia entry has no explanation of how to pronounce it, so I am completely lost. Oh well, doesn't matter.
Will correct us.
Hiroshi, name to be determined later, the longtime head of Nintendo and man largely responsible for the company's massive rise to power, has finally announced that he is stepping down and that Satoru Iwata, formerly of HAL Laboratories, would be his successor, just as Nintendo posted a net fiscal 2001 profit of 106.4 billion yen, or $858 million. While the GameCube and Game Boy Advance are largely to thank for this windfall, the cheap yen is probably mostly responsible, and the company has also warned the markets not to expect a repeat in the next year.
So I thought I will go out on a high note.
Yeah, we talked about this already last year, that he had announced his intention to retire, but he's obviously now timed it so that it's coming out together with these big results.
Yeah, that's nice. It's always nice to say, I left the company with with
biggest profit ever. Yeah, that was me. Hey, I'm already going to warn everybody, next year is going to suck.
But Iwata is trying to do something about it. In our next story, Iwata goes after Square.
Having just assumed the mantle of head of Nintendo, Iwata wasted no time channeling his predecessor's attitude by proclaiming the recently launched Final Fantasy XI a failure, as it was not sold as it has not sold as many units as would be necessary to recover its costs, and because the servers having been mismanaged. Of course, this also came as it became clear that Nintendo's online strategy would not be broadband, not include a hard drive, and basically not be a strategy as much as a flailing fish gasping for air.
So he's just behaving like a child.
It's Nintendo doing what Nintendo does. If they cannot compete with somebody, they will talk bad about them or claim that, their new thing is going to be so much better. He goes off and on this tangent about how, Nintendo won't launch online until they really know that it's the right thing to do, whereas everybody else is simply doing it.
Yeah, and everybody is asking about it.
Well, and that's the thing. It is the way of the future. Yes, you're going to make some mistakes on the way. There's going to be some missteps. And Final Fantasy XI starts out, a little rickety-rockety on the PlayStation 2. It's going to get ported to PC. It's still running today, 20 years later. So, it has definitely paid for itself. It has made good amounts of money for now Square Enix. This is just sour grapes. It's because we've talked about this already on the show a few months back, how Nintendo has signed up a cooperation with Square, how Nintendo money is going to help finance
and then
developments on the GameCube that'll have interactions with the Game Boy Advance, because Nintendo's thinking that's the way multiplayer connectivity is.
Yeah, the Crystal Chronicle thing.
Exactly. And the fact is that Crystal Chronicles is going to look kind of shabby in comparison with for the time, ultra-realistic looking graphics of Final Fantasy XI, the big extensive world that it provides, and the possibilities for ongoing revenue streams through subscription, which is really something that a one-and-done disc-based game cannot generate. Remember, EA.com is still pursuing the dream of, getting those online subscriptions. Everybody under the sun, World of Warcraft has already been previewed a couple of times. Everybody knows, or at least is predicting, that this is a wave of the future. And
except Nintendo.
Except Nintendo, because their online adapter is basically dial-up.
Yeah, that's a horrible little thing.
Yeah, it's now granted. Give Iwata a couple of years, he is going to revolutionize gaming with the Wii, and then of course he's going to fall flat on his face again with the Wii U. But Iwata is going to bring it. But it's interesting to see him give this kind of dig, because that's not how he's going to be known.
Especially bad mouthing a company which still have to release a game for you is a bit weird, strange tactic.
He has to remember, at E3 they were trying to show off their broadband connector, or their online connector, and it's so primitive in comparison with everything else. He's basically, this is the only defense he has, is that
just
all
say
these people
everything's
saying
bad.
online is the place to be. That's wrong. You guys just want to sit down and play the single player experiences.
Yeah, for some people that's true, but I think the majority isn't waiting or is waiting for the next multiplayer release at this point.
Exactly, and and they're no longer the only game in town with 4 plugs in the front of the console.
Oh yeah, that's true as well.
Yeah, Dreamcast already did it. Xbox has it as well, and they need that killer multiplayer app.
Yeah.
And, well, okay, that's kind of a transition.
Yeah. Rare to leave Nintendo fold.
Rumors at E3 are flying that Star Fox Adventures may be the last game Rare delivers for the GameCube. The studio has been a big backer of Nintendo hardware since the NES days, but the lack of any new footage for Perfect Dark Zero nor any other titles at the show has many thinking that they may be going into a multi-platform future.
And they're partly wrong, partly true, but it's not multi-platform. But I think they get bought out by Microsoft after this.
Exactly. Yeah, we already talked about this, I think, 2 months ago. There were rumors swerving that maybe Activision might buy them, maybe Microsoft might buy them. Well, it is going to be Microsoft. If I had to guess, I'd say the deal is probably already almost done in behind the scenes at E3, because that's why they're holding back Perfect Dark Zero, which would have been that 4-person multiplayer shooter that the game could have really used.
Like Rare leaving Nintendo is probably a really big blow for Nintendo.
It is a big blow because they're having such a hard time with the GameCube's disc format and to get third-party support. And so this is going to hurt them. Now, Rare is going to continue developing quite actively for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
But their console output is going to be Xbox exclusive once Microsoft gets a hold of them.
Also, those Game Boy Advance games aren't really the killer apps on the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just there.
They're just there, yeah. They don't really have any big ones. Can't remember if they released a version of Diddy Kong Racing for the Game Boy Advance.
They did for the DS.
For the DS. Was that Rare or was that Nintendo?
Ooh, that I don't know.
Yeah,
but they did a banjo game on GBA. That's what I know.
That's true. Yeah, it was an isometric.
I think it's a decent game, but not like It isn't spectacular or something.
Yeah, I mean, this was the problem that, their main resources are going to go into other games. And
just a side hustle.
Yeah. They're just going to be doing stuff on the other platforms, but it's not the same. And you're going to get Conquer Live and Reloaded for the Xbox. Banjo Pilot, that's the game that they released. Banjo Pilot for the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that one. Well, that says a lot because I have quite a bit of GBA collection. So
yeah. And then of course they do Diddy Kong Racing, but for the DS. So that's 2007. So there's a pretty big gap there.
Yeah.
Viva Pinata is a pretty big one for them then on the Xbox, and I think they also do a Game Boy Advance or a DS version of that. So there's a few games that come out, but yeah, their time on Nintendo consoles is over. So
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's continue on the next story, and I think this is a company we talk about almost every week now, or every month. Infogrames cuts jobs in Sheffield.
Infogram Studios Limited, formerly known as Gremlin Graphics, has seen 55 staff members cut as Infogram attempts, in their words, to quote, restructure to ensure quality control, end quote. The company would still release Superman, Shadow of Apocalypse, and Micro Machines in 2003 before being shut down completely.
And was it? Did Superman, Shadow of the Apocalypse have a good quality control?
Oh no, that game is kind of a dog. Like most, and we've had this discussion before. Superman games are hard. It's a tough nut to crack.
And Micro Machines, that's an old game, right? It's a new.
It's a new version of an old game. So it's using the same Micro Machines license, but now for the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox, the reviews are not great, to say the least. They're actually kind of lame. And yeah, I mean, it's the idea of Micro Machines.
It's just an old concept. In 2003, who was playing with Micro Machines at that point?
Well, and this is the thing. I mean, you could still do something. It could be a good racing game, but you're going to have to, do more with it than just say, okay, it's a racing game.
And probably just a 3D version of the NES game.
Well, you're going to get, 4-player split screen, which is something new. That was always one of the big problems with the Micro Machines format, the top-down view.
Yeah, but I really like the multiplayer in that you have to outrace somebody from the screen. That was the unique thing in Micro Machines.
Yeah, that was the unique thing in Micro Machines, but at the same time, it's a huge frustration factor because there's only so much real estate on a television screen. And
That's
remember,
true.
We're not in HD yet. In 2003, We're still using standard definition television sets. Now, if you were talking, HD, where you can make everything really, really small and show more of the screen, that might actually work. But when was the last time you went back to play Micro Machines?
Probably this year somewhere on the Game Boy. Yeah,
on the Game Boy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, I mean actual multiplayer on an NES or something.
No. I can't remember anymore.
It can be a very frustrating experience because if you fall behind a little bit, now suddenly you're constantly popping in and out as the screen is trying to keep you on the screen. It's not an experience necessarily that has aged well, at least not for me.
Well, the biggest problem is that you can't see what corners are going to. You can see if you're racing that there's suddenly a corner
Yeah. You have
coming.
to memorize the tracks.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing of micro machines. Actually, there's a game called Pixel Junk Racers on the PlayStation 3, and that's full HD, and that's has the really tiny cars on the racetrack, and you see the whole track in one view, and that's maybe a better modern incarnation of micro machines than this version.
I was always a bigger fan of everything at once on the screen. That's why games like Super Sprint or Super Off-Road were, in my opinion, the better experience.
Yeah, those are cool games as well. And they probably hold up nowadays as well.
Oh, tremendously well. I still like going back to the Super NES version of Super Off-Road and play that occasionally because it is just a very, very fun game. Granted, it's no patch on the arcade where you actually had the steering wheel and the gas.
Oh, yeah, I played that as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great arcade game. But well, okay. We're getting lost. There's so many stories left.
Yeah.
So, next one.
PC to console announcements abound.
In the wake of E3, lots of PC game ports for consoles get announced. Apparently, the great power and online capabilities of PS2 and Xbox are inspiring publishers to look at the portable console market at the profitable console market as a place to expand existing PC franchises. Some of the games looking to reach gamepads are Star Wars Galaxies, Jedi Outcast, and Black and White.
Those PC conversions to console at that time were always a bit awkward, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, now, granted, virtually none of these would actually make it. Jedi Outcast gets a port to the Xbox and to the GameCube. Doesn't make it to the PS2. And Star Wars Galaxies, I mean, they probably talked about it, but there was just no chance of actually making that work. And if you check out my interview with Gordon Walton, who worked on Galaxies for a while, one of the big problems that they had there was the customization of the characters. So you could basically grab any kind of clothing and armor and stuff and see it on your character. That would have just killed pretty much any of the consoles at the time. From a memory standpoint and processing standpoint. So, yeah, a lot of these ideas are going to be tried. Black and White was supposed to come out on the Dreamcast already before this, and now they've announced it as a PlayStation 1 port.
What? How?
Yeah, I don't know.
It barely ran at my PC when that released. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those weird things where either somebody in the marketing department at Lionhead doesn't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, they said, oh, that's maybe a good idea. There's a lot of PlayStation 1s around and we have this game. Just port it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just try it.
We don't need a mouse control for this.
No.
Okay.
No.
But, oh well.
Another weird thing which doesn't really work. GBA to the Get camera.
That's right. The Game Eye was shown off at E3, a color digital camera peripheral for the GBA that would work with Stage Debut, a GameCube game that would let you digitize your face and have it attached to a 3D model, which would then be part of some mini games. Miyamoto would later state that Stage Debut was the inspiration for the Me channel on the Wii.
I've seen videos of this, and there's, I think, even code in some games for this. Probably when you hack the GameCube now, you can probably still put a picture in some games.
That's possible.
And maybe there's even a prototype of the Game Eye somewhere around in people's hands. I feel this is a product which did see sort of light of day, but never got sold or something.
No. This gets canceled. Now, there is video of it being shown off at trade shows, and I've put a link to that in the show notes. But the product never gets released. Stage Debut never gets released. There's a couple of different theories for this. Possibly the cost of the camera would have been prohibitive. Possibly the idea that people, might start taking pictures of their junk and stuff, which was actually a problem with a similar concept. There was an arcade game based off the rock band Journey back in the early 80s that used digitized pictures of the band members' faces on characters in the game, and had this feature that the arcade game had a camera, so when you got a high score, it would take a picture of your face and display it on the screen.
Okay.
They very quickly, yeah.
And people didn't show their face, but something else.
Exactly. I'll give
really in arcade. Wow.
Dude, it's one of those things. You let a bunch of teenagers have a camera, we know what's going to happen, okay? And unfortunately, nobody even got paid for it. There was no OnlyFans back then.
Oh, yeah.
So, it was, this was a bad idea, and there's a reason why there was no camera add-on to make photorealistic Mii's later on. They needed to have control over the input.
Oh, and still you can make very dirty things on the Mii channel, probably.
Exactly.
There's always a way.
Yeah, I remember this has got to be at least 10, 12 years ago. There was a game that I had on my iPhone. I think it was Konami even that made it. It was one of the big Japanese studios. And it was this 3D action game in this weird fantasy realm with dragons and stuff. And you could actually customize your character by taking a photo of your face, and it would then be put on your character in this game. And it was a really cool concept. I mean, didn't really play a big role in the game, but it was a pretty cool way of using the tech. But I think that Nintendo is just not the company to do this at this point.
But it's always fun to put your own content in games. I always did that as well as a kid when I found the source files in a PC game and messed around with it and tried to make other artwork in the game, just my own work. So it's always cool to modify games. So the idea is there, and you of course have the Game Boy camera, which is quite a cool device. It's really basic, but it's a really playful thing. And so it could work, and I think that the DSi has a camera again, so the idea isn't going away.
No. The idea is not going away, and it has become very popular in a lot of different games. I just think Nintendo got cold feet at this point.
And maybe it's too soon to make a great digital camera.
The video footage of this, actually, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty impressive what they were able to do. Now, again, I just think it's an issue that they didn't want people taking color pictures of their junk, but that's just me.
Probably it is. Yeah. That's it. Okay, let's continue on with the next story.
Yes, please.
Gamehouse claims sales record.
Casual game maker Gamehouse claims that their Super Collapse puzzle game is the fastest game to ever reach 100,000 units sold purely through online sales. The Windows and Mac game sells for $19.95.
I never heard of this game maker, and I never heard of this game. So
okay, the publisher still exists. Gamehouse is still out there, and they're still making games for mobile and whatever, primarily mobile. And this game, Super Collapse, I'd never heard of it either. According to the website, I put a link to the archived version of the site over on the Wayback Machine, and that's where I got the $19.95 price tag from this point in time. The game is only like a meg and 25, so 1.25 megs.
Okay.
Download.
So you can put it on a floppy. Exactly.
You can put it on a floppy. It'll be downloaded really quick on your 56K modem, but it is $20 a pop, and they sold 100,000 of these in just a short period of time. Now, obviously, these are their claims in their press release, but
that's a lot of money.
The fact that this tiny little game that could not have cost that much to develop has generated this kind of cash, and it's cash directly to them. I mean, yeah, they have to pay for servers, but when you think about a retail release, less than half of the money for the retail release is coming back to the publisher, let alone the developer. This is showing the potential for this market, and we just talked 2 months ago about how Valve got started just started Steam. This is a sea change in software distribution, again making Nintendo's plan for a non-broadband modem that much more not part of the time.
Yeah, they always are a bit ridiculous with technology, but.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, they're going to leverage outdated tech very well with the Wii in a couple of years, but
that's true. But online sales. Do you ever still buy a game nowadays?
On Steam, yes.
Yeah. I also.
And I just the last thing I bought was on the Epic Store. I bought Carcassonne.
Oh, you bought something on the Epic Store. That's I never heard that sentence before.
Really? I mean, everybody just uses it to get the free game.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. I got a ton of those too that I'll never play. This is how I got GTA 5, which I still haven't installed. But yeah, it's no, I actually bought it because they had a really good sale on it, and so I immediately picked that up and a whole bunch of add-ons for it.
Yeah, I always wanted to have games physically, but nowadays it doesn't make sense anymore to buy a game physically because the game isn't on the disc anymore.
Yeah.
So, it's only retro games for me, and then I try to buy as much as possible on Steam. And the eShop, I pretty much stopped buying games there because I'm afraid the eShop will be gone again when they announce a Switch 2 or something. And, I don't want to lose all my games. So that's still a problem with digital. But I'm mostly all my modern games I buy digitally nowadays. So
I honestly can't deal with the clutter. I pared down my collection. Well, this is already years and years and years ago. I pared down my collection to what I consider my essentials, like the games that I have an actual emotional attachment to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a collection of probably about 250, 300 box PC and Amiga and C64 games, and I pared it down to maybe about 60 now. 50.
Yeah, especially the PC games are really big. The big boxes.
That's the thing. They take up room. So I have an entire bookshelf back at my parents' place that is just those games. So my Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat 1, Mortal Kombat 2 on the Amiga, the entire original Leisure Suit Larry series, the King's Quest series, things like that. Those games I kept. My Cinemaware games I think I'm only missing one of those. And so on and so forth. Those I kept. Everything else, that went by the wayside.
Yeah, and that's why I collect for Game Boy. They're so tiny. I can keep 300 Game Boy games easily.
That's actually not a terrible idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep moving on.
Counter-Strike sales surge in Germany.
In the aftermath of the school shooting in the city of Erfurt and renewed calls for limits on violent games, Counter-Strike got a 250% boost to its sales in July.
So why is that? Maybe the school shooting made sort of...
a lot of people were afraid it was going to get banned, so they're going out and buying it before it's no longer available.
So they're... Yeah, sort of FOMO.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happens in the United States. Every time there's a mass shooting, everybody goes out and buys guns because they're afraid the government's going to come and get my guns, which, if you know anything about U.S. politics, is never going to happen. But it's a great way for Fox News and right-wing radio to drum up listenership and viewership because rednecks are dumb. and you don't have to be a Southerner to be a redneck dumbass nowadays. You just have to be a Rush Limbaugh ditto head. Okay.
Okay,
yes,
no comment. No
well, we're about to get really deep into that. Let's go.
Let's talk more about guns in the US. US Army deploys at a E3.
The U.S. Army, in a move to promote its America's Army game, parked an armored vehicle in front of the E3 show entrance to try to get attendees to check out their game. According to PC Zone magazine, UK publication, when asked about the purpose of the game, aka was it a recruitment tool, a soldier stated that it was a way of communicating to the public what it was that the Army did day in and day out. PC Zone then went on to say, and I'm not sure if they were joking or not, the conversation ended when a question about friendly fire in the game was asked.
And I remember this game. Is it the same game that they said they used to train soldiers, or is that a different game?
Well, you're probably thinking about when we talked about the Battlezone conversion kit or conversion, when they used the Battlezone arcade game in the early 80s as a training tool for one of their armored vehicles.
No, there's a modern game. Maybe it's this game. Maybe I don't know. There is a modern game. They say, we use this to train the soldiers, but you can also play it at home.
Well, that's America's Army. Yeah, that is this game. In theory, I don't know how serious they really are about training them with this, but the game does have a lot of the limitations of real world combat. So it's not like, you level up and suddenly now you get the rocket launcher or something. You don't get new weapons. So it's like the arsenal is available to you at the beginning, which was one of the criticisms some gamers levied. Is like, there's no progression here. It's supposed to be a representation of the real military. It's not like they hold back, weapons from the new soldiers and only give them to the senior soldiers. That's not how it works.
And friendly fire isn't in there.
That I don't know. That is an excellent question. Does it include friendly fire? Let's see. Here's the question. Does America's Army include friendly fire? And the question is, but how easy is it to be killed by friendly fire? Stupid. Okay, so somebody is actually complaining that they get kicked out of the game for friendly fire.
Oh, wow.
So you actually
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed, no. So, yeah.
So far for realism.
Well, it is real. You get kicked out of the army.
Yeah, that's true.
If you kill a fellow soldier, they're not going to let you still be a soldier.
No,
hopefully.
That's true.
So, that is actually realistic, at least according to what I just found with a very quick Google search. And they actually, apparently they phrase it, you getting kicked off the server as you're going to jail. So it's probably like a temporary ban or something. So that's cool. Now, another interesting thing here is that in this early version of the game that they're promoting, there were supposed to be two sections of the game. So everybody is familiar with the Proving Grounds section or the Operations section, which is where it's the first-person shooter version. But there was also supposed to be an RPG-like element called Soldiers, where you were basically living through the day-to-day life of a soldier. And this was going to be using FMV, and that game never gets released.
Well, that sounds interesting, but I don't know how that will work with an RPG with FMV.
Well, I mean, in theory, you could just do it as, make choices. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do then? And maybe follow rules similar to an old Police Quest game where you had to do everything by the book. Otherwise, the case would be lost. That might be one of the ways of doing it.
Yeah, but that's not really what I think is an RPG. But yeah, it's still you play a role.
Like I said, RPG elements.
Yeah.
Because a proper RPG is not about just upping your stats. Okay, that's a tactical game. No, the an RPG is about playing a character, making decisions as the character, which means that 99.9% of RPGs are not RPGs. But that's another argument for another time that we don't go into now.
But an FMV game will limit your possibilities in making decisions. So
yeah, but every computer program is limited by the options programmed into it.
That's true, but FMV is especially limiting.
Yes, this is very, very true. But it would have given it that authenticity. But this also probably explains why they dropped it.
Yeah.
Because it just would have been very, very limited. It wouldn't have had replay value. And it probably just would have opened them up to all sorts of criticisms by people making fun of stuff. You know?
Yeah. We probably would have still have YouTube meme videos about that, probably.
Oh, of course, you know it.
Probably with a lot of bad acting with real life soldiers which aren't trained to act and stuff like that. So it's better to leave that.
It's better that we didn't get it. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay,
continue on.
Let's move on.
A new financing models may save gaming.
At E3, the number of licensed games and sequels was overwhelming, a trend that seems to be accelerating as publishers flock to quote-unquote sure bets in the face of ever higher development costs for next-gen systems. We've talked previously on the show about Seamus Blackley's new venture, Capital Entertainment Group, that hopes to make it easier for developers to access funding, and Edge magazine profiles them as well as Start Games, that's Start with an exclamation mark after it, a new startup led by industry veteran Shahid Ahmad, which aims to help devs with both money and know-how to develop functioning prototypes before pitching to publishers.
How does this work out?
It does not work out well for very long. The idea is, I guess, sound, where they're investing in the company not to get the actual game started, but to get a playable version. And Ahmad actually says in the article, when a developer goes to a publisher for their pitch meeting, where you normally would walk in with this big binder explaining the game design and some prototype artwork and stuff, it would be better to walk into the publisher, sit them down, put a controller in their hand and say, this is how the game will play. To actually have a prototype level or something ready to go. But obviously that costs a lot of money. You have to build the game engines and all this other stuff, which this is the point of Start Games, is to try to help that funding.
So, but also help them with giving them an engine or something, or to make a quick prototype or something like that.
And this is going to be obviously the problem, because if you're creating a prototype in a game engine that is not tweaked for your game, the prototype you're creating isn't really going to be a good representation of it. And this is something that I've seen a lot in comments from developers, that often games are not fun to play until very, very late in the game's development. Because you have to do the iterations. If you listen to Sid Meier, it was his design philosophy is you start with a general idea, you start with a principle, and you just keep making tweaks to it until it becomes fun to play.
Interesting.
And that's how, he develops games like Pirates and Civilization and Railroad Tycoon, where you just start with a general concept and you keep making tweaks until the game is fun to play.
So, that's exactly the other way around. So,
exactly.
And these prototypes are probably really terrible, and
of course
you can't sell those games with those prototypes. So you better can make artwork or sell the idea.
And then hope and pray that you have enough money to keep iterating until it becomes fun.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those things. Now, on a side note, with this new financing model, Computer Gaming World in the US has a news article about a new game called Gladius Online. This would get renamed to Roma Victor, because LucasArts in 2003 releases a Roman gladiator game called Gladius. But this MMO game, which is set in ancient Rome, that's going to get financed both through some investment money, but also through crowdfunding. So the game's going to release, I believe, in 2006, and they're already talking about it now, and they've got some early screenshots of it. But that's going to be this other mode for financing indie games, and it's already starting at this point.
That's crazy. I feel that's something of the last 10 years or something, but apparently.
No, well, remember, you're at, and this is why I like the idea, that story earlier about that little puzzle game that was selling for $19.95, and Steam means transferring money online.
Yeah, it's easier.
It's getting to the point where people are willing to accept it, especially people that are more technically astute, like PC gamers. And the idea of investing in this, and they've got the blog entries. I've got links to Roma Victor's archived websites because the game is obviously out. There's no entry for it on Moby Games, which I thought was kind of weird. And it looks like the game was actually up and running, at least in some form, for at least a year or two.
So how did that crowdfunding work? So did they just...
I don't know.
I think it's just sort of from pre-order, maybe.
It may have been pre-orders, but even if you're thinking about it in that sense, I mean, most crowdfunding is pre-orders.
Yeah, that's true, but you have to deliver.
Well, you don't have to deliver. How many crowdfunding projects never deliver a product?
Yeah, but then you sell it as crowdfunding. Then you say, okay, you get an option when this game releases, you get the game. But well, if you're saying, okay, pre-order now and get it in 2 years or something, then you still have to deliver, or else people will get mad.
You have to deliver, but if your company goes broke, they can sue you, but they're going to sue a legal entity that has no funds.
Yeah.
The Germans have a wonderful saying: you can't pick a naked man's pocket.
Yeah,
because he doesn't have pockets. So the bankrupt company is the naked man. Now, as a huge fan of things like Roman history, I want to play this game so badly now. I mean, they're promising this. The game, as they're describing it, is probably unplayable.
And it's an MMO, so there's no people playing.
Well, no, it's unplayable from the structure, because the idea is that you start out either as a peasant or a slave. Then you have to slowly move your way up by fighting in the Colosseum until you earn enough money, basically, I guess, grind through combat or something, until you earn enough money that you can buy your freedom, and then you start moving up the ranks in the military until you can become a general leading armies.
Wow, sounds ambitious.
Extremely ambitious, especially at this point in time, and I have no idea how far they actually got.
Probably not far, or else we would have known.
I'd love to talk to anybody involved with it. The few names I was able to glean from this don't really have a long history in the industry. I have no idea how far this got, what the playable version was like, but I want to know so much.
Well, then you have to plan another interview episode.
I've got to track somebody down first. So if anybody listening to this actually played the game back in the day, or knows any of the developers, and even though I keep swearing I'm going to stop doing interviews because I've got too much of a backlog, let me know. I want to know. I
want to know now as well. So
okay, there you go.
Please send us an email.
We're almost home, so
yeah.
It's home.
Nvidia introduces Cg.
With the battle for dominance in the GPU field heating up and new chips with new functions appearing every 6 months, the main two APIs, Direct3D and OpenGL, have not been able to keep up. Nvidia has decided to release its own shader programming language, Cg, that's capital C, small g, so like the C language in graphics, that will let programmers access the latest functions of its G4 series of chips without having to wait for the APIs to catch up.
I can imagine the developers didn't use this because it's annoying.
Well, this is the thing. CG is still being developed to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, you have to think about it. an API is never going to be able to get updated fast enough for new chips every 6 months.
But also you have to make separate things in your game just to do that one thing in the card who nobody has, for example, or because it's a really new technology. So you can also just wait until it's in Tier 2D or OpenGL, and it would be a heck of a lot easier, probably.
In theory. And remember, we've talked about this a couple of times. We talked about this in our 30-year jumps with games like Wing Commander and Ultima Underworld. If your game is targeting the big, bad game guy with the massive PC rig who is going to be spending $500 twice a year for a new video card, they're also not the people who are going to pirate your software. They're going to buy it.
Yeah.
The extra effort. If NVIDIA's promise that this CG is easy enough to use is worth the investment, because it's going to get you on these guys' computers. And these guys are not going to pirate. The people who you could wait for are also far less likely to buy the software, because they're the ones with a 2-year-old or 3-year-old video cards, or like me, a 7-year-old video card, who don't really care about the latest and greatest. So this is for the developers who are making games that are really, really shocking. And the big, big game of the show at E3 was Doom 3, with its absolutely amazing shader techniques and bump mapping and multiple layers of textures and all this stuff, things that may not be possible in these standard APIs, but if you're writing to the metal, do work. Now,
But Doom 3 is working on OpenGL, and correct me if I'm wrong, but OpenGL, isn't it open source?
OpenGL is, as far as I understand it at this point in time, managed by basically a group that decides what to add to it. But
okay,
it's
so
not just open source.
So if it would have been open source, NVIDIA could have made those things directly into OpenGL, but apparently that's not the case.
No, it's not an option. Everything is running behind schedule at this point.
And ATI also has something like this?
Yeah, see, and this is now a new battle. So ATI is bragging that 25 games are already supporting their Radeon cards' new Trueform, Smart Shader, and Smooth Vision capabilities, with over 100 in development and support from the likes of John Carmack.
So these are just similar API calls.
It's basically the same thing. We're not waiting for Microsoft and the OpenGL committee to, figure out new headers for all of these new functions that we can do, all these new cool tricks that our hardware can do. We're going to do it ourselves so that the games can take advantage of it now. And this is basically, again, where you're going to end up with, the little blurb when you boot up the game telling you which video card this works best on, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this is an interesting topic for your discussion tonight.
The guys I'm going to be talking to, at least one of them is basically out of the scene at this point. They're going to come back into it, but at this point they're out of the scene. The other one is in the scene. So yes, it will be a topic we'll discuss. I'm not sure how deep we'll get into it though.
Well, could be interesting. Continue with the last story.
Yes.
Fatal Frame gets picked up for the movies.
Tecmo's horror game Fatal Frame has been picked up by DreamWorks for a movie adaptation, which, like most of these announcements, is as far as it goes.
And we're better off.
Yeah, Fatal Frame could have been an interesting one. I don't know. I guess it probably could have worked. Would have
the horror movies are also quite fun, so maybe.
Yeah, you could have probably pulled it off, the whole idea of, using the picture, I think it's a cursed camera to capture spirits or whatever. I can't remember what the plot of the game was, but that mechanic could have been very cinematic. The first person view through the camera lens type of thing. But yeah, it doesn't take off. It doesn't go anywhere. It's dead. So, but I can understand why they wanted to do it. It's got a female protagonist, horror, video game. It's the exact mix that Resident Evil was able to really, really turn into a profit center. So yeah, but it doesn't happen. Okay, that's the end of our stories. Wouter, you have one task left. What is the word of the episode?
The one story which kept sticking with me was the Yamauchi story, and I want to say the word is glory, because he took all the glory of the prophet.
And I mean, you can't say that it's undeserved, but yes, glory. And let's face it, after over 5 decades in charge of the company, turning it around, creating, first a toy company, arcades, video games, and everything else that he did in between, the guy, his like will not be seen again. That's all there is.
It's a legendary person, yeah. That's for sure.
No, not legendary. We know he legendary means we're not sure if he existed.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. So King Arthur is legendary.
Oh. I learned something today.
Yeah.
Not only this, but...
You can talk about certain events in a real person's life as legendary because they may or may not have happened or may have not have happened that way. But the person themselves, if you know they exist, they're not legendary.
Yeah, that's... Okay, I learned something today.
Yeah, horribly misused word.
Thanks for the English lesson, Skull.
No problem. It's the same in German, or I'm sure Dutch has legendär.
Legendarisch.
Yeah. Same definition.
Yeah, probably we use that.
So now you can correct people when they use it wrong.
I hope they all like it when I correct them.
Oh, I'm sure they do. People love it when I do that to people. Oh, wait, no, I get paid to do that. I'm a teacher. Damn. That's why they all nod and smile like that, because they're afraid I'm going to give them a bad grade. Oh, well, I won't. I will only give them a bad grade if they perform poorly. That's just the way it is. Okay. Everybody, sign up for the social media, sign up on the YouTube channel, support us on the Patreon, check out Wouter's really cool streams. They're all linked in the show notes, as are all the sources for this episode. And come back next time when we'll be traveling back 40 years to September of 1982. Have fun.
Bye.